Welcome to another sketch video talk through. Today we're going to be drawing a picture of George McFly and his love interest Lorraine Baines from the movie Back to the Future. And if you haven't seen this movie, then first of all, stop watching this, go rent it, go buy it, and then come back. You'll appreciate this drawing that much more having seen the show. Anyway, as you can see, we've got things set up on our artboard here in Photoshop. I've sketched in, just blocked in the space really. Used the major shapes of some of the features in the heads, these characters, to kind of lay out the space. And now I'm just trying to see what feels right in terms of exaggeration, in terms of these features that make these two characters recognizable. Characters are played by Crispin Glover and Leah Thompson, and both of them have a really great look for 1955, which is when their characters are pretty much portrayed in the movie Back to the Future. And so here we're just trying to get George McFly's features keyed in. Again, the eyes, they're not just almond shaped like you learned when you were in elementary school. They've got different shapes and contours to them, and they'll be something that I practiced for the rest of my life. They're always really tricky, trying to get them to look right. Those eyes are looking kind of tired, but I think the pupils are kind of where they need to be looking at the camera, and we'll go back to those after I let that just rest for a little bit. I say this in a lot of the videos, but sometimes when you're just trying to noodle on a feature rather than just overdo it, take a break, go do some other things. And usually that's the time I go and draw something like a bow tie or something from the costume or whatever the character is wearing. We'll block in some of this 1950s hairstyle for George McFly. While we're sketching, we are listening to the soundtrack of the movie by Alan Silvestri. And we have that hair just kind of swooping over to the side. We'll want to make sure that we have those lines just swoop to give it that action, and then a little bit of shadow on the face. We'll come down here, block in the tuxedo. And let's see if we can add some life to this character right next to George, Lorraine. We'll key in some of that hair. Now this hairstyle is really amazing. Just perfect for the era, and if we do this right, we'll be able to hit that special look. And as you can see, I'm just blocking in. Sometimes I'm just blocking in some lines, so I just know where to put things. So it looks like we've got a straight line directly below the edge of the eyebrow down to the nose. Hopefully that'll end up looking like it needs to. If not, we'll make some adjustments. And I'm just kind of noticing the roundness of the end of the nose on Leah Thompson here. Lock in some really round spaces for cheeks. And again, we'll do some eye shadows. I have a lot of eye makeup, so we'll need to do her eyes in a way where they look feminine, but they don't overdo the fact that she's really kind of modest with the amount of makeup that she uses. And again, we want to make sure that it looks like she's looking right at us. based on the source image that we're using. I am going to play with this nose just a little bit, maybe just move it up. I don't know. I think maybe overdid that. We'll just leave it there for now, and maybe we'll need to adjust it later. So, all right, so back to the face now. Both of these characters, they've got a smile, but they're not a toothy smile, and if we're not careful, we're not going to get the right effect. So we're going to have to pay close attention to the angles, to the corners of the mouth, and what that's doing to the spaces around the smile for that effect to be pulled off. I want to make sure to characterize this the contours of the face here without overdoing it. Often on a female subject, you want to not overdo angles, and if you've got a cleft in a chin or something like that, maybe you got to soften it just a little bit, just so that you don't totally remove the beauty from the character. And I think I'm just going to try over for this nose area. I've decided that I could probably just do better rather than move something around. Let's just redraw it. Oftentimes we're scared, especially when you're drawing in your sketchbook on a piece of paper. You think, gosh, I drew this nose so perfectly, I don't think I can draw it again. I don't want to erase it, and you kind of just leave it there and deal with some of the other features. And sometimes you just have to have the courage to erase and start over. And I'm confident that if you do that, you will draw it better the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time. Like, the first time is hardly ever the best time. Don't be afraid to do things over and over and over again, especially when you're drawing here. That might not apply for someone drawing live characters with a Sharpie. That's a completely different approach, but since we're not demonstrating that approach, we won't worry about it. All right, so I think I've got that angle kind of nice, but I'm wondering if it can be embellished a little bit more. So we'll see if adjusting some of the corners of the mouth here and that dimple will emphasize that curious smile. Maybe make it a little wider. So if you make something wider, it's going to affect the things that are around the area you just widened. So I don't know that I've completely got that. So I don't want to make the cheeks wider per se. So maybe that's a little bit too wide of a smile. I'll just keep working on it. Kind of, it's the same space that it is, and we'll just keep plowing forward on this one. There's a lot of information here on these drawings. You've got really great facial structures, dimples. While the smile is kind of tricky, it is pretty unique to the character. And so that's one of the great things about these characters and the source images, that we do have a lot to go on. When you're drawing from source images that don't have a lot of lines or anything like that, it can be really, really hard to position features correctly so that you get the likeness just right. And here we go. We'll just add some eyelashes, enough to make it feminine, but not enough to overdo any kind of makeup. And as we go, sometimes it helps to just add a little bit of shading, just so that you can see how the lines add up, especially when you add a little bit of contour with the shading. It'll either support the lines that you've laid down, or it will let you know that they're not right. So I think we're in a good spot. As with the hair, like I said, the hair is a great style, that 1950s style. It just kind of swoops in front of her head there. And rather than draw just a big block of color for brown hair, we like to just draw in the flow of the hair. And the color kind of takes care of itself. We'll add some tone to it later, but the color will take care of itself. And there's some really, really cool kind of curls and waves in this hair, so we'll try to capture that with some of the lines that are happening. And the more and more you can get just really, really confident strokes throughout your drawing, the better it's going to look. If you've got little hashy strokes that are kind of just building every single feature, then the overall drawing doesn't look as confident and it looks fuzzy. And if that's the overall effect you're looking for, that's fine. But it can carry those less confident characteristics just visually to the viewer. I think we're in a good place there. Add a little bit of shading to the neck. Lorraine has a dress on. However, the way we've cropped this, we're not going to see very much of it because it is a off-the-shoulder kind of dress. And we'll just hopefully count on the viewers recognizing the characters and feeling comfortable that she's not completely without clothes here. Back to George. Crispin Glover's actually got some really interesting silhouette. His ears are a little different shaped than I'm used to drawing, and it's probably just the angle of his head that create a little bit more of an interesting shape. Maybe the way his hair is kind of overlapping his ear, but nonetheless, we'll pay attention to that, and I think that will support our drawing. I like to make sure there's some sort of a connection between the eyes and eyebrows and things like that. So even though you might not have a line connecting them, you want to make sure there's kind of an invisible line, perhaps, that kind of connects the flow of features like the eyebrows or the eyes. That'll make things look less disjointed. I also like to pay attention to the angles of the nose as they rest back into where it connects to the cheek. Sometimes they go straight up, sometimes they go back towards the cheek, sometimes they're angled in towards the nose. It all kind of depends on the angle that the person is looking at you. But that's also an important thing that you can pay attention to on both of these subjects. Looks like we've got the nose, kind of the nostril angling back toward that cheek area where the line kind of defines the bottom of the cheek. I'll be a little bit more gratuitous with the angles of the face for George McFly. That'll add a little bit more to kind of a maybe a masculine look, or maybe just a less kind of a less doll-like or less porcelain look like we would want Lorraine to look. And again, with his hair is dark, but it's kind of, it's got that product in it from the 50s, and so it'll have a nice little shine to it. We'll make sure that we leave space for that. Looks like we're in a good place now. I'm going to drop the opacity of this first layer. This is my sketch layer, and always when I'm talking to folks about drawing their characters, I always recommend that they do kind of their initial sketch, get it to where they're comfortable with, and then take another pencil, a darker pencil perhaps, or a pen, and then they can ink what they have produced, or they can just darken the lines that they want to have stick. In this application, because it is electronic and I'm doing this in Photoshop, I can just drop the opacity of the already light lines that I was drawing, and then I can switch to my darker color and basically just ink, if you will, add ink to this drawing. These will be my more confident lines. I'm no longer really exploring. I kind of have an idea of where everything needs to go. I just need to solidify these lines that I really like. So as you can see, the eyebrow's already there, but now I'm going to just put the final form to the eyebrow, and I'm going to make sure that all these lines that should really matter are dark. The lines that kind of run right down the face, you can see that light line that goes from his forehead all the way through his nose, down through his mouth. Those are the lines that are just kind of establishing space and kind of the left and right area of the face. I don't need to make that dark. I'll leave it there, and sometimes you'll be able to see that in the final, but I think just having those sketch lines there adds to kind of the style. In some cases you can allow that to stick around. But here we are just kind of defining that nose, and we'll define some of the shadows with some cross hatching, and then we'll get this mouth done in there. And the shadowing around the mouth that's really going to help dictate exactly what the angles of the face are doing and how that smile is actually working. And as we continue to add shadow and color, we'll continue to define that area, but I think we're good for now. We'll get some of these other lines in. I like to have a dark line under the chin just to separate that from the neck. More often than not, that works. Sometimes, depending on the lighting, it doesn't, but we'll definitely do it here. And we want to just make sure that we add some emphasis to the shadowing around the eyes, which kind of defines that plane and that structure that is around the eyes. And after, of course, you are looking so closely at everything, you do want to take a step back and kind of view things all at the same time. And while we're doing that, we'll stroke in some of these features with the costume, with the tuxedo. George McFly and Lorraine obviously are here in their costumes that they wore when they went to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, which was part of the whole scheme of the movie. And spoiler, I'll just tell you that Lorraine actually goes with Michael J. Fox's character, Marty, because she was really in love with him, but Marty and George scheme so that he can save Lorraine from being taken advantage of. Their plan kind of goes sideways, but in the end, it still kind of works out. George is able to defend Lorraine from the class bully, Biff, and she begins to fall for him at the dance, saving the day. And Marty McFly doesn't dissolve in the time-space continuum like his siblings because he changed the way the future would have panned out. Anyway, this probably is making zero sense if you haven't seen the show. If you haven't, stop doing this and go watch it. There we are. I think we got the chin just right for Lorraine. And some of these lines just for the arm, if you can just get them nice and confident and long. The contour of the brush is changing. I've made that adjustment in the settings so that it's not just a constant single width, which is really important to the style here. Other styles are based upon a single width line, but this character style definitely it is not. So grateful for Photoshop and those brush settings. And here we are stroking in just kind of the hair. And in the shadows, the darker they are, that's going to help define the color of the hair. So we've left a lot of space here for the highlights. But I think you can kind of get the sense that because of the way that we're doing the shadowing, that those are highlights and that she doesn't have blonde hair. But then again, maybe it's just because we're looking at the source image and we know. Key in that dimple there. And here we are back at this important mouth and the smile area. Got to make sure to get this right so that the smile looks just like that Leah Thompson smile. She doesn't have a lot of a top lip, but we'll add just a little bit just to add some femininity to the mix. And then she has that really interesting line coming up on the right side of her smile as we look at her. All right, and we'll add a little bit of blush to her cheeks with the crosshatch. And some color on the eyes. Now we'll need to make the top line a little darker to find that eyelash. We can't overdo it. The lines underneath the eyes in this setting are really just helping us understand that she is smiling and the cheeks are kind of pushing up against that space, creating a darker line underneath the eye. A lot of times, especially like when you're a kid, lines under the eyes like that kind of indicate drowsiness and tiredness. And in this setting, if you do those lines correctly, it's going to indicate just how the muscles are coexisting together and reacting together. And how if the cheeks are being pushed up against the eyes, then that fold underneath the eyeball is going to grow in prominence, which is going to support the idea of a smile. One of the best scenes in Back to the Future was when George McFly approaches Lorraine in the cafe and talks to her about being his density. That's got to be one of my favorite all-time movie lines. And on the YouTube channel, there is a sped-up version of this. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, go for it. You'll hear that scene, as well as the final scene when George punches out Biff Tannen and saves the day, makes Lorraine fall in love with him. You have the whole scene all stitched together. One of my favorite movie scenes of all time. So we're in a good space here with the lines. Now we're kind of defining just where the characters are and where our space is on the outside. Again, create a nice thick outline around the characters for this particular style, which will also be a functional aspect of the illustration a little bit as we fill it with some grayscale color. And again, these cross-hatching lines are helping define what that space around the mouth is actually doing. Some of the curves and things like that are happening. Add some color over that line under the eye, and that kind of helps make it very clear that he's not opening his eyes super wide, that is kind of the bottom eyelid. And then you're going here and just make a slight adjustment to the mouth. I think we've got it dipped just a little bit. I'm going to flatten it just so we can kind of force the expression to be more George McFly-ish. I think it was dipped a little bit too much. I think that's in a better spot. And we'll define that line just a little bit more. Make it pretty dark so that we know what's going on in there. As we back up from a distance, we can kind of see the overall effect. I find that when I'm inking that I will often go back to some of the areas after I kind of get a more confident line. I'll need to go back and even put some more emphasis on certain areas. Those areas are going to be the eyes, because those do need to command kind of a lot of attention and get people's attention first. So you want to make those darker. Underneath the nose, where the nostrils are, that's also a typical space to darken. And then features in the mouth. Those areas I think really define the personality of who we're looking at. Other than that, some of the emphasis can be on just some of the shadowed areas or some of the strong shape areas of the actual shape of the face. There we go, just a subtle hint of makeup there. And shading above that eye. Look at a happy couple. Okay, Just add a little bit more of a line underneath the chin there, kind of like I've described when we were doing that for George McFly. And throw some more color in the hair, darken that up just a little bit. And how are we looking? I think we're looking pretty good. So right now we'll kind of select the space around these characters, and then we'll invert it and fill the space with our gray color. And as I've said in some other videos, if you've watched those, when we start filling with this gray color, that'll kind of be this middle ground, and we'll push and pull light and shadow from that, rather than just start with white and have to add color, and reserve space for highlights and things. We'll start in the middle, and it's amazing how you can see where color needs to be pushed for the shadow and where you can see opportunity to pull for some of the highlights. So there we have our mid-range gray that we've put in, and we'll start to just pull with the light. I've added a new layer here. I'm using the same color that I was using to sketch initially at probably about 50%. And I've added a new layer, and I've just had that color setting or layer setting to be a screen. So I'm getting that color to show up just like I want on top of the gray. It's pulling, and it's pulling that highlight. And when I go over a space, because I'm using that opacity, I get a little bit more kind of a doubled effect, a little bit lighter color. And that's just something that you learn to do. I'll fill in all of the space here with the skin, essentially. And then you can see how I leave the hair. It'll be dark. We'll go back in and do some highlights a little bit later. But I'll just pull all this area back and slowly get that to where I want it. And you might ask, why do you have to go through this? Why couldn't you have just added that color? You can do whatever's comfortable for you, but I find that starting in that middle ground sometimes just helps fill in a lot of space, and then it just seems to flow a little easier for me anyway. So try it. If you don't like it, then do it the way you like. But I enjoy filling it with the gray, and then just focusing on sections like highlight sections or shadow sections, rather than just having everything kind of just being an addition to when you start from that blank white. Hope that makes sense. And here we are, just following really the source material, the source image, and just seeing where those highlights are. Obviously a white shirt, eyeballs, those things are going to be pretty stark. We'll do a little bit of rim lighting on Lorraine here. Add some of the highlight to the hair, like I'd mentioned. There we go. Now she's got some kind of baby's breath type detail in her hair. I don't know what you would call that, but it's just part of the costume essentially, and just part of the accessories to what she's wearing to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. So we'll just key in some of those things, and we'll add that in a little bit later with some stark white color just to make that really pop. Now we've created a new layer. We've set that to multiply. So we're actually using the same light gray color, but since it's being multiplied on top of the layers underneath it, it adds shadow. So it pushes the shadows into our subjects here. And really anywhere that we've done any cross-hatching, that obviously can be filled in with some shadow. I don't do it dark all at once. I do like to kind of just add little by little, which is one of the benefits for doing this electronically. If you're doing this with paint or with pencil, it's all a different approach that you've got to just learn. Add some shadow just to define the costume a little bit. And fill in that bow tie. It's essentially black, so we won't hold back. Maybe a little bit of rim lighting on the edge. And then here's where we can get really into defining the color of Lorraine's hair. All of the area that we've kind of cross-hatched and all of those strokes we can go over with a dark color. We still reserve some space for some highlights. And color in the lip just a little bit and fill in more of the hair here. And the music here is making me nervous. It's the music in the tense part of the movie. It makes me feel like I've got to hurry this up. Don't feel rushed. Whenever you're doing these, you don't need to feel rushed. Sometimes when I'm drawing these characters, I do feel like, because I'm recording on a computer, I feel like I need to be efficient and get them done quickly. Don't feel like you need to finish super quick. Take your time, do thumbnails, do version after version after version. Have lots of paper on hand so you can start over if you need to. The more that you start over, the more that you draw it, the more that you'll kind of discover, and that's a really good thing. The worst thing that you can do is rush yourself. Now, that isn't to say that kind of putting a time limit on doing a character sketch isn't a bad thing. That can also be a good thing, and that's kind of what I've been exploring personally the last year or so. And that does help you to just have more confidence in the strokes that you are throwing down on the paper. So mix it up a little bit, time yourself, but then also just make sure that you're letting yourself grow by taking it easy, taking it slow. Add a little bit more shadow below the neck there for Lorraine. And as you can see, I'm kind of just, I've zoomed out, so I'm just looking at both characters and I'm just seeing, okay, where do we need to work? I think we still need to do a little bit of work on George. And with the layers, we can go back and I can either work on the black lines, or I can work on where I need to push and pull shadow. Right now, I'm just gonna work on just this line around his eye. Looks like I've overdone it there. I'm gonna need to get rid of some of this stuff so that I don't completely give him a black eye. I can erase that easily and then just put a little bit more in. And then we can go about these other layers with our shadowing and our highlights. We'll add some shadow here, right there on the bridge of his nose. Just kind of do an overall assessment of how we're looking. Looks like we do need to add a little bit more detail here over the eye. Maybe make that just a little darker. Like I said, that area around the eyes is really, really important to recognizing someone. A little bit for Lorraine as well. And then we'll continue to just do a couple of final additions to George. Now, adding some of these shadows is going to help define some of the lighter areas that we don't shade in. So you're kind of doing a shading and highlighting at the same time by avoiding some of the shading, I guess, in certain areas. It's kind of a clumsy way to describe that, but. And just a couple of final tweaks here, or final additions with the highlighting. Get around the nose. That just makes this kind of just pop once and for all. Looks like these two are just about ready to get out on the dance floor. This has been a lot of fun. Again, great movie, great characters. It's a lot of fun to draw them and a lot of fun to share. There's a lot of videos here on the channel that you can watch, both the time-lapse and the talk-through videos. So thanks for joining me on this one. We'll take a look at the final piece here. Here they are at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.